on a personal level, even if there was no difference at all between organic and non-organic, me personally, I would still buy organic just to help out the smaller farmers. I generally like to try to help out people in my community. So instead of spending less money and going to something like Walmart or Costco and just giving them even more money than they already have, personally, I would rather spend a little bit extra money and go to a local farm.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in and welcome back to another Sunday Q&A. Before we start, just a quick reminder that if you like what you see, be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on any of our videos. Also, if you have any questions, ask them down in the comment section and we'll either respond to you directly in the comment section or answer your questions during another one of our weekly Sunday Q&As. Alright, time to answer your questions.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in and welcome back to another Sunday Q&A. Today's question is with regard to organic versus non-organic meats while on the carnivore diet. A lot of you want to know what exactly it is that I do and if I think it's worth it to go the organic route when consuming a carnivore diet. Before I get into the whole organic versus non-organic debate, I would like to back up a little bit. As I've stated in earlier videos, back in 2010, I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis. So ever since 2010, I've made a dramatic shift in my nutrition approach. Back in 2010 was when I started experimenting with organic foods, and then in 2013, I made the shift to almost exclusively eat organic meats and produce. From 2010 to 2013, a decent amount of what I was consuming was organic, but from 2013 up until present time, pretty much 100% of what I've consumed has been organic. The only time I really don't consume organic meats is if I get together at a family function and I'm not the one preparing my meals. But if I'm preparing my own meals, which is 99.9% of the time, then I do consume organic meats. So I'm going to try to be as objective as possible when discussing this topic, but just know that, again, I am going to be a little bit biased because I have been eating organic for the last 10 years. So it's impossible for me to be completely objective. I do have a little bit of bias just like everybody. It's impossible for me not to have any bit of bias. Now, when it comes to today's video, I'm going to break it down into 4 different categories. First, I'll get into the whole vitamin, mineral, and antioxidant consumption of organic versus non-organic. I will then get into the fat ratio when it comes to organic versus non-organic. Then I will get into the omega-3 to 6 ratio in organic versus non-organic. And lastly, I will get into the farming practices in organic versus non-organic. Now, when it comes to vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants, really the data is all over the place. Over the last 10 years, I don't even know how many studies I've read up on organic versus non-organic foods, and the studies are all mixed. Some studies will say that there's no difference, other studies will say that there's a big difference and that you get more benefits from organic foods. Just as an example from a few of the studies that I've read, one study with regard to antioxidants in organic versus non-organic foods found that organic foods had up to 69% more antioxidants than non-organic foods. I read another study with regard to vitamin C that said organic oranges have 62% more vitamin C than non-organic oranges. Another study with regard to vitamin C found that in organic oranges, there's 58% more vitamin C in organic oranges. So the studies are kind of all over the place. Those are just 3 of many studies that I have read that are on the pro-organic side. I've also read plenty of studies on organic versus non-organic that says there's basically no difference. And the truth is, while you can get more benefits in terms of more vitamins, more minerals, and more antioxidants from organic food, that's not a guarantee. A lot of it is going to come down to the farmer and the farming practices utilized. If you have a farmer who really knows what they're doing, they're alternating their crops, they're not just growing the same crop all the time, they know the seasons properly, they know when to plant certain foods, when the foods are ready, they're going to pick the foods at the proper ripeness. That is going to play a much larger role in determining if a food is going to have more vitamins, more minerals, or more antioxidants than the whole organic versus non-organic. If you have a farmer who is just planting regular foods, it's not organic, but he's doing everything properly, and then on the other end, you have a farmer who is planting organic, but not planting at the proper season, not picking the foods at the peak of ripeness, then the non-organic food is going to potentially have more vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants than the organic food. So when you remove those factors, you have to look at the farming practices as well. So if you have organic and non-organic, and the farming practices in terms of multiple crops being alternated, being grown at the right season, being picked at the peak of ripeness, if all of those things are identical, one farmer is implementing organic farming, another farmer is implementing just regular farming, that is going to be the best way to determine whether organic versus non-organic is going to be better. Until now, there have been no studies that have done that have taken two farmers using the exact same practices, one using organic farming and the other one using non-organic farming. But from the studies that I have read, again, it's 50-50. 50% say there's no difference, 50% say that there is more benefit. Me personally, I find that I do feel better ever since I have started incorporating the organic food into my diet about 10 years ago. Now, that could be just a result of me also making dramatic shift in the way that I approach my nutrition. But in general, I do find a difference. Could be a placebo effect, could be legit, there's no way of knowing for sure. And right now, the studies are inconclusive. They're 50-50 in terms of whether or not it is beneficial or not. Personally, my opinion when it comes to organic versus non-organic is if you can afford it, then get it. If you can't afford it, get what you can afford. Make sure that you're making the healthiest options possible. But as long as you can afford it, then there's no negative effect to going organic. Whether or not there is a benefit is up for debate, but the one thing that we do know is that there is no negative consequences in consuming organic versus non-organic. So while there may not be a benefit, there's definitely not a benefit, if you get what I'm saying. Another thing when it comes to organic versus non-organic is going to be the fat consumption. A lot of people want to know if organic meat is going to be more fat or less fat than non-organic. And the truth is, it's going to depend on the cut. If you get medium ground beef that's organic, and then you get extra lean ground beef that's non-organic, the extra lean ground beef is going to be leaner than the organic medium ground beef. It's going to come down to the cut of beef. Now, with regard to the actual percentage in the same cut, if you get a T-bone steak that's not organic and you get a T-bone steak that is organic, generally the organic steak is going to have a little bit less fat than the non-organic steak. Again, though, a lot of the data is all over the place. Some data suggests that there is no difference. Other will suggest that the organic meat is going to be leaner. From what I found personally when I go shopping for my groceries, just looking at it aesthetically, there is a big difference in the look of organic versus non-organic. This isn't all the time. Sometimes you can go to the grocery store, pick up an organic steak or a non-organic steak, look at it, and it's going to look pretty lean. If you know how to look for it in terms of the marbling and all things like that, then you could just use the eye test when picking out your meats. Generally, though, from the data that I have read, the difference in fat content isn't going to be huge from organic to non-organic. However, it's 50% of the studies are saying there's no difference. The other 50% are saying that there is a benefit. So the one thing that we do know is with regard to fat content, while organic food may not have less fat than non-organic food, we do know that it's not higher in fat than the non-organic. Another thing, a lot of people want to know the omega-3 to 6 ratios. That's another thing where the data on this one, it's a little bit more in favor of the organic foods. With a lot of the studies that I've read, a lot of them seem to suggest that there is more omega-3s in relative to omega-6s in organic versus non-organic meats. Just a couple of examples from studies that I've read. There was one study that examined wild-caught fish versus farm-raised fish and found that the wild-caught fish had 56% more omega-3s than the farm-raised fish. Another study that I read on wild-caught versus farm-raised showed that the wild-caught fish had 62% more omega-3s versus the farm-raised fish. So for omega-3 to omega-6 ratio, the data on this one is a little bit more in favor of the organic to non-organic fish. Most of the data does suggest that wild-caught fish contains less fat and more omega-3s relative to omega-6s than does farm-raised fish. Out of the three, vitamin, mineral, and antioxidant content, fat content, and omega-3 to 6 ratio, the omega-3 to 6 ratio has the strongest evidence supporting the benefits of organic versus non-organic. For the other two, when it comes to vitamin, mineral, antioxidants, and also fat content, that one, it's a little bit more split. 50% says there's no difference, 50% says that organic's better. And lastly, we're going to get into the farming practices. Are the farming practices better when it comes to organic versus non-organic? And for that one, this one we could pretty much definitively say yes, that organic farming is definitely going to be better for the environment than conventional farming practices. Just one example, when you look at the fertilizers and pesticides that are sprayed all over these giant monocrops, you are going to be releasing a giant amount of CO2 into the atmosphere from all the pesticides. The other thing with organic versus non-organic farming is organic farming is a lot more sustainable. If you are varying your crops, planting them at the right seasons, picking them at the peak of ripeness, the soil is going to be a lot more fertile and you'll be able to grow a lot more on the same amount of soil just because there are more vitamins, more minerals, more nutrients in the soil. If you are planting the same crop over and over again, like these giant monocrops of corn, of wheat, what happens when you plant the same crops in the same space over and over and over again is the soil becomes depleted of certain minerals and vitamins. When you deplete the soil of vitamins and minerals, that is going to trickle to the actual plant that you are producing. If you're growing apples in a field where the soil is completely depleted, then those apples are also going to be depleted of vitamins and minerals. You're still going to have some vitamins, minerals. It's impossible to have zero vitamins and minerals in anything that you plant, but there will be less than if you had planted those same foods in an environment where the soil is rich in vitamins, minerals, and nutrients. So that is one of the biggest benefits to organic versus non-organic farming. The other thing with regard to organic versus non-organic farming is on a personal level, even if there was no difference at all between organic and non-organic, me personally, I would still buy organic just to help out the smaller farmers. I generally like to try to help out people in my community. So instead of spending less money and going to something like Walmart or Costco and just giving them even more money than they already have, personally, I would rather spend a little bit extra money and go to a local farm. Lately, that's what I've been doing. I don't even go to health food stores anymore. Lately, what I've been doing is I go to small family-run farms and I will buy my meats off of them just so I could support farmers in the community. But in the end, it's going to come down to you and your personal decision. Again, personally, if I can make a recommendation for you, I would say if you can afford organic food, great, go the organic route. If you can't afford it, then go with what you can afford, because if you're going to go and purchase organic food, but it's going to put a major strain on your finances and you're really worried about your bills, then the health consequences of the stress that you're going to be experiencing from the lack of funds so you can pay for your organic food is not going to be worth the potential health benefits of going organic. If you can afford organic, yes, go the organic route. If you can't afford organic, then go with what you can afford. And then if you start making more money and you could actually start to afford organic, then you can make that decision when the time comes. But really, it's going to come down to you and what exactly you can afford. But that's pretty much it for today's video. Thanks again for tuning in. And once again, if you do have any questions with regard to my experience on the carnivore diet, any questions about the carnivore diet, or if you have any questions at all with regard to anything like exercise programs, stretching, if you have questions with regard to anatomy, physiology, anything like that, recipes, go ahead, ask your questions down in the comments section. I'll either answer you directly in the comments section or answer your questions during another one of our Sunday Q&As. That's it for today's video. Thanks a lot for tuning in, and I will see you again next week.
That's it for today's video. Thanks for tuning in. If you liked what you saw, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on any of our videos. And if you have any questions, ask them down in the comment section, and we'll either respond to you directly in the comment section or answer your questions during another one of our weekly Sunday Q&As. Keep fit, have fun, and we'll see you again next week.